Welcome to the fourth video in this series regarding effects for the 5th edition rule set within Fantasy Grounds. In this video we're going to look at modifiers to abilities and also to the advantage and disadvantage suite of effects. So we need to start off as usual with the character, so let's select Vary. We've already added our power group as we've done in previous videos, and we're ready to enter our first effect. We're going to look at check first of all. So right click, add effect. Go into our dialog and we type in the keyword, which is check, as usual with a colon. Now check will accept a number or a dice string or any of the special ability tags such as level, proficiency, etc. So let's give this one a 1d6. Make sure we've set our targets to self, and then we need to get Vary onto the combat tracker, so let's do that, and then we can apply the effect to her. We can see now that we've got the effect applied to Vary, so that any time that she makes any kind of check, she's going to get an additional 1d6. So if she makes a strength check, you can see that the extra d6 is rolled, and similarly with the con check and with any others. Now we might not want her to get a 1d6 to every check that she makes. We may wish to restrict this to simply a certain ability or to more than one abilities. So let's edit this now, and we'll add a comma into this and then type in strength. And this is going to restrict the additional 1d6 bonus to just strength checks. So we'll remove this and add this, and we'll now go and make a strength check, and we can see that we get the extra 1d6. But if we make a dex check, we see that we just get a die 20. Now this extra 1d6 will also apply to any other checks which are based on strength that Vary makes. So if we go into the skills tab and let's say we make an athletics check, we see that we get the extra d6 for that because athletics is based on strength. But if we make an insight check, for example, then we only get the d20. We can further refine this action or this effect by adding more than one ability. So let's edit this now and put another comma in after the strength, and let's also give her this bonus to her dexterity checks. If we swap out the old for the new, go to the main tab again, and we can see now that she gets a bonus to the strength and dexterity checks, but not for any of the others. This means that because her dexterity is getting a bonus when she rolls initiative, which is dexterity based, she'll also get the additional die 6. And also if she makes any kind of dex based skill check, she'll get the d6 for that as well. However, this won't affect any attacks, for example, because attacks are not ability checks. And equally, it won't affect damage because that too isn't an ability check. So essentially, that's it for checks. It is fairly straightforward, not too difficult, and we can move on then to the looking at the ability effects themselves. All the ability checks, and there's one effect for each ability score, work in the same way. They all only take numbers. They won't take dice strings, but they will take the special tags like level, etc. So let's add an effect in the usual way, and let's do strength. So STR is all that's required. And then we have our colon, and then we need to tell Fantasy Grounds what the modifier is. As I say, won't take dice strings, so let's give Vary a bonus of 6 to her strength. Make sure the targeting is set to self, and we add in the new effect. So now, whenever Vari makes any kind of roll which is related to strength, she will get a bonus of 6 to that roll, or at least she'll get a bonus of 3, because what it's done is adding 6 to her actual strength. Now you'll see that the character sheet hasn't been altered in any way, as we saw in earlier videos. That doesn't happen when you add an effect, but when you make the roll, the Fantasy Grounds will take into consideration the additional 3 points of modifier. So if we make a strength check, we can see down here that the +3 has been entered, and we've gotten a +2 bonus to our strength check rather than the plus or the -1 that we would normally have gotten. We can see if we make a dex check that there is no modifier. So this works through all of the skills as well. So if we make a skill or an athletics check, we can see that we get the modifier of +3 to that. But if we make any other kind of check which is not not strength based, then we don't get the +3. Now, unlike the check effect which we saw earlier, this will affect Vari's attack and damage rolls. If we now make a melee attack against the bad wizard, you'll see that she's getting a +3 bonus to the attack because her strength is that much higher. So instead of what would have been a +1, she is getting a +4 to the attack. She'll also get that for the damage. If she rolls some damage against the wizard, you'll see that she's got effects of +3 in there. Instead of the -1 that she would have got, she's got a net +2. So this so strength on all the ability scores work in exactly the same way. They will add effects into any roll which relies on that ability. If we were to make an attack with a longbow, we'll see that we don't get any bonus to that, because the longbow, being a ranged weapon, is based on her dexterity and not her strength. So that's it for the ability checks really. They're all fairly straightforward. You just have to realize that the additional bonus is computed when a roll is made, and it doesn't actually affect the character sheet in any way. So let's move on to advantage and disadvantage. There's a whole suite of these for all the possible advantage and disadvantage rolls that you could make. For example, there's initiative, there's attacks, there's saving throws, checks, skill checks, and death saving throws. So all of these have got their own advantage and disadvantage effect, which can have various modifiers depending on the particular one. So let's start off with the advantage to initiative. So we need to add a new effect for this, and our keyword here is ADV for advantage and then INIT for initiative. Now, unusually, this one doesn't need a colon because there's no modifier that can possibly be made to this particular one. You either get advantage or you don't. So it's as simple as that. We make sure that our targeting is set to self, and we can apply the effect. If Vari now makes an initiative check, you'll see that she automatically gets the advantage on the dice roll, the green dice signifying the dice which has been accepted, and it tells you the value of the other dice that was dropped. Unusually in this case she's dropped, or she's rolled 2 20s, but this shows that one of the dice has been dropped. So that's really very straightforward. If we wanted to give her disadvantage on initiative, then we take out the ADV and replace it with DIS. Swap over the effects, and now when we make an initiative check, she rolls with disadvantage. The red dice indicates that disadvantage has been rolled, and it tells you in the chat there that a 14 has been dropped. Well, we can move on now to the advantage to attack effect. So let's create the effect in the normal way. and it's ADV again, and ATK for attack. This time we do need our colon because it is possible, as we'll see, that this can have modifiers. But let's just see what it does first of all with just advantage attack. Make the target self and apply the effect to Vari. If Vari were to now make an attack against anything, let's say she makes a longbow attack against the wizard here, you can see that she's rolled the attack with advantage. Green dice indicating the dice that was accepted. The chat shows you the dice that was dropped. This applies for any attack. If she attacks with a melee weapon or whatever, then all of her attacks are going to be rolled with advantage. We can restrict the advantage to either melee attacks or ranged attacks, and we can also restrict it to just opportunity attacks, like we saw in the first video when we looked at just the attack modifier itself. So let's edit this function or edit this effect, and we'll give advantage to attack, but only to melee. We get rid of the old effect and add the new. And now when Vari makes an attack with a melee weapon, she gets advantage, but when she makes an attack with a non-melee weapon or a ranged weapon, then she won't get advantage to the attack. Now in exactly the same way we can give her disadvantage by just removing the ADV and adding in DIS, S preferably. Swap those out, and now when she makes a melee attack, she's going to do so with disadvantage. We can see the red dice indicating that, but if she makes a ranged attack, then she doesn't have advantage or disadvantage. So that's really it for this attack. As I say, you can also restrict it to opportunity attacks, and if you refer to the first video, it'll show you there how you would set that up. Okay, so that's advantage and disadvantage to attacks. There is another type of disadvantage and advantage you can give, and that is you can place advantage or disadvantage on another character or enemy using the grant advantage or grant disadvantage keywords. So let's have a look at that one. Add an action. It's a long one, this, so it's grant ADV ATK. We need the colon in this case, and again this one can be restricted to melee or ranged, so let's give this one the ranged modifier, and we're going to set the target at this time to targets. We're going to leave this as it is because Vari's not wanting this one on herself. She wants to place this on an enemy. So that's the effect. So let's move it to Vari's turn. Let's get rid of all these ones just so we can see more clearly what's going on. And Vari is now going to select the giant spider as a target. You can see that pops up on the combat tracker, and then she's going to place this effect onto the spider, and you can see that the spider now has the effect placed on it, grant advantage, attack, ranged. So if Vari was now to attack the spider with a ranged weapon, then she is going to get advantage against this particular enemy. If she attacks it with her mace, which is not a ranged weapon, a melee weapon, then you'll see that she doesn't get advantage. Now, in fact, any ally of Vari's who attacks the spider will get advantage to their attack roll. Not just Vari herself, but anybody who attacks the spider will get advantage on any ranged attacks that they make against it. Now, exactly the same as in the others, if we want to give it or give ourselves or give some disadvantage to attack, then instead of the ADV, we remove that and add in DIS. We'll leave this as targets. We now have to remove this from the spider. We've still got the giant spider selected as a target, so we can just place this effect now on the spider. And now in this instance, if Vary were to make a ranged attack against the spider, like so, she's going to get disadvantage to her attack rolls, but it won't affect any melee attacks that she makes against it. And just like in the other case, any of her allies, any player characters, would get advantage or disadvantage against the giant spider if they make a ranged attack against it in this case. Now, if we change the targeting of this ability and make it self, then this means the effect is going to be placed on Vary, and that means that anything that attacks her will do so with advantage if they are making a ranged attack against her. So let's remove these effects from here. We've still got the giant spider targeted, but we can place the effect now, and as you can see this time it's placed the effect on Vary herself because the target is self rather than targets. So she is now granting any enemy that shoots at her disadvantage on any attack rolls that they make against her, as long as they are ranged. So if we move it to the spider's turn here, then if the spider makes a normal bite attack against her, you'll see that it just does so normally. But if it makes a web attack, which is a ranged attack, then you'll see that the spider makes that roll with disadvantage. So that's it for grant dis attack and grant advantage attack. They work pretty much the same as the attack ones, except that you could be placing that onto an enemy or onto yourself to grant advantage or disadvantage on rolls which are coming in rather than going out. Now there are 4 more pairs of advantage and disadvantage checks, and they all work in exactly the same way. We've got the advantage and disadvantage to saving throws, to ability checks, to skill checks, and to death saving throws. We're not going to cover all of them in detail because they all work in exactly the same way. So let's just show you a couple of examples. Let's add a new effect, and we're going to do the ADV again for advantage, and we'll give advantage to saving throws, so it's SAV. We need our colon. We can then modify this and restrict it to a particular ability or save. So if we left it as it is, it would give advantage to all saving throws, but if we type in intelligence here, for example, all in lowercase, put the target as self, then it's only going to give advantage on intelligence saving throws. So we'll place the effect on Vary, and then if we make a saving throw, we see that she gets advantage. If we make a con saving throw, she doesn't. So the opposite of this one would be dis-save and a modifier. You can also string more than one ability in the same way as we've seen before. The advantage and disadvantage to skills work in precisely the same way. We have an A, let's do a disadvantage, so DIS, and in this case let's it's skill, SKILL. We need our colon, and then we need to tell it which skill we look. This skill on its own will cover all skills, but let's say that we are going to give her disadvantage on perception checks. So target self, place the effect on her, and now when we go into skills and we make a perception check, we see that we are doing so with disadvantage, but none of the other checks are affected. The opposite of this skill is obviously a DV skill. And you've got exactly the same pair of skills for ability checks. So just quickly show you that one as well. we've got ADV again, and it's check, so it's CHK. And again, we can restrict this to a particular ability or abilities, or we can allow it to stand as it is and give advantage to all ability checks. But let's just say we're going to allow advantage on wisdom checks. So we type in wisdom. We make sure the targeting is set to self and apply the effect. And now when Vary makes a wisdom ability check, she does so with advantage. Additionally, if she makes any skill checks which are based on her wisdom, such as insight, then she will also get advantage on that particular skill roll. But if we make a sleight of hand check, for example, which is based on dexterity, she doesn't get the advantage. Obviously, the opposite of this one is dis check, and it does exactly the same thing, except that it does disadvantage and advantage. And the last one that we can look at are death saving throws. And again, so we have dis, let's give it disadvantage, it's death. Target self, let's apply the thing. And now if Vary needed to make a death saving throw, she does so, in this case with disadvantage. So that's it for this particular video, and if you have stuck it out this far, we'll see you in the next one, where we'll be discussing something much more exciting. Thanks for watching. Cheers for now.